We appreciate everyone joining today. There's over 100 folks registered for this webinar series, and we really appreciate the interest. And hopefully we'll gain some additional folks joining the registration as we go forward. We're going to talk about some things that honestly, during my time as a FedEx contractor, we've never talked about. There's been some conversation maybe at the Line Haul Summit about some of these things, but most of the time when you see things online, podcasts, webinars, whatever they are, they're really about some tactical activity in the FedEx Ground TSP world. How to buy trucks, how to recruit drivers, things like that, how to grow your company. And that's not going to be what this webinar is about. We're going to talk about the transformation, which is the most significant thing that's happened to FedEx Ground since FedEx Ground started in 1998. And we're all in the middle of it. And I think it's really important that we take some time and focus on what that is and why and what's going on and how it's going to impact us. And then do we even have the skills to be successful? And we're going to spend 8 weeks working on those skills. So when you registered on mygroundforce.com, we appreciate you doing that. You should have received an invitation to the community forum. Right now, the only place we kind of have as contractors to go exchange ideas with other contractors, ask questions, get answers, make suggestions is the multitude of various Facebook groups that are out there. And given what we're going to try to do with this webinar series, then we created this forum so that you can go in that forum kind of like a Reddit and ask questions and submit topics, exchange ideas, and interact with other TSPs. The only folks that are going to be in there were the ones that registered for the seminar, so that's how you get the invite. If you didn't do that, you can still go to the page and click on and join the community forum. And for session 4, this is where we're going to collect the questions that we're going to talk about, because honestly, the first 3 sessions are going to be jam-packed with content. And it's unlikely that we'll spend a significant amount of time on questions, but we have this community forum. You can ask questions there. I'll be in that forum every day, interacting with you folks, as well as in the future, Alex and Matt, our Wall Street analyst, that's going to be in session 3. And so as things progress, and you can put your questions in the forum, we'll collect those together and get them curated and be ready for session 4. To be able to do to talk about the things that you want to talk about. Obviously, all these sessions are going to be recorded. We'll post them on our website as well as they'll be posted on our YouTube channel. I know there were a lot of folks that texted and said they registered, but weren't going to be able to be there today and would it be recorded? So, yep, they'll be recorded. They'll be on YouTube. So really, I guess then maybe you probably saw in the various invites that we did. Why are we doing this? I talked about it a little bit. Essentially, times have changed for FedEx Ground contractors. We all know it. We can all feel it. We all see it. Some of it's impacting our revenue. And that's true of both line haul and P&D. And it's really important that we face the reality that, in my view, the FedEx that we've all worked with over the past however long, that FedEx Ground doesn't exist anymore. They're in the baby steps of becoming something else. And it's important for us to realize that, analyze it, figure out why. And this transformation is going to impact all of us. It already has. And it just so happens that FedEx is doing this at the same time there's a recession going on. Most folks, when you look at the government numbers, don't indicate that there's a recession, but if you talk to the average household, you'd get a different answer. And that's a tough way to start off a transformation. And in particular, for those of us involved in the ground business, it's a very huge challenge for us. It creates all kinds of uncertainty, which is another way of saying risk. And I thought it important maybe that I offer some things that, given my background, that might be of use to the contractor world. Most of you know my background, but if you don't, you can see it on the website, either in the About section or on the Webinars tab. And I spent years as a Fortune 500 executive. I ran global divisions. I won some awards for doing that. And then I've spent the past 5.5 years in the FedEx ground world. Uh, Launched mygroundforce to help contractors get more control and understanding of their business and leverage technology to improve their profits and lower their costs. And through the cost of doing that, have met and talked to hundreds of contractors. Of course, I also founded the Line Haul Summit, myself and the other three guys. And obviously, we meet a lot of contractors, have a lot of good conversations. So I feel like I'm kind of the right guy to go through this and talk about where we are, how we got here, get an outside view from a Wall Street analyst, which no one's really done in this space before. We're going to go through in detail, hey, what is this contract that we're actually signed up for with a Fortune 50 company? You know, FedEx has the expectation that you'll kind of act like a Fortune 50 company, but they don't, we'll all say that they don't really pay us to be like a Fortune 50 company. So it's always that tension is there. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to spend the last 8 weeks going through in detail sessions on how to maybe improve our skill set to adjust to this new world, right? Because our relationship with the benevolent dictator has changed. And it's going to, we can all argue whether or not how benevolent they are, but in general, that relationship has changed and it's not the same anymore. So we're going to talk about the fundamentals of business, how to go from where you are towards world-class excellence. What do companies who focus on world-class excellence, how do they get there and how do they stay there? How do you use metrics in your business to improve your understanding and make better decisions? How do you comply with the FedEx contract? You know, I think in the future, non-compliance with a contract is going to get even more challenging for those who struggle with that. How to use technology to help you as a partner going forward. Have you ever really thought about decision-making as a science? You know, there's a lot of information on how to organize yourself in a way to make better decisions. We're going to talk about some of that science. We're going to use that science then to develop a strategy or some suggested ideas on how to manage the risk that we're finding now, how to develop a strategy that will best position you to be successful in this transformation. And then, hey, well, I'm sure we'll collect a lot of ideas along the way. And the week before the summit, we're going to collect some ideas and have kind of a wrap-up discussion. So that's going to be how things go. And again, if you want questions to be considered going forward, please get in the form and drop them in there. That gives us one place where we can collect them all. Okay, so what is the state of the network? You know, we just heard President Biden give his State of the Union address. Well, I didn't hear it, but I know he did it. But so what I wanted to do, I thought in order to be able to work our way through a series of discussions on how to improve our skills to kind of match the environment we're in, I thought it would kind of be good to talk about what is this environment that we're in, kind of where are we? And look, this is not going to be a 2020 conversation when volume was going through the roof and the biggest problem was finding drivers and trucks, right? Things were pretty good then, challenging, but pretty good from a revenue perspective. Nobody was going out of business. This is a different conversation today. It's not a doom and gloom talk, but it's going to be a realistic conversation about what I think the state of the network is. I've spent the past few months talking to folks coast to coast, both inside FedEx and out. And as you heard, we're going to have a FedEx analyst. He and I spent hours talking together. And I'm going to give you what my view of the state of the network is. And it's based on facts. It's no guessing going on here. And, you know, we really have to stare this problem in the face. Okay, most of us have huge amounts of money committed. We owe banks for trucks and acquisition loans, and most of us are had to sign the personal guarantees. And that puts us in a situation in which we can't easily escape the situation that we're in. And it's incredibly important that we're successful. And we got to face up to the fact that things are not what they were. And so it's important for us to, to go through that conversation today. I've been saying some of these things for a while, even going back to last year's summit. It was pretty obvious that the transformation that has already started. They talked about it some last year, but it was pretty clear things were already going. And I just feel like one of the things that I can bring to this team is maybe talk to you about how I have learned how to kind of look at how corporations behave. You know, we've heard a lot of talk from FedEx along the way about what they plan to do and how they do this and how they do that. And some of you I've talked with about the fact that their behavior doesn't always match what they say is their strategy. And that's kind of an indicator on that what they're telling us may not always be what their true corporate strategy is. It might be their conversation with us, but it may not be perfectly aligned with what they're trying to do inside their company. And so we're going to try to learn how to do that a little bit more. I'm going to use some examples today on what that is. You know, as a Fortune 500 executive, like for me, I ran a $125 million global division across 40 countries. And so I was constantly trying to assess situations macroeconomically in 40 different countries with a whole different set of employees. And the only way you can do that kind of thing is spend the majority of your time as that leader looking out of your organization, not in. And historically, as FedEx contractors, and I found myself doing it, we kind of spend all our time looking inside our company tactically. And do I have a driver in this truck? Do I get the maintenance done on that truck? Did I get a run on the unassigned rotation today? And we spend very little time looking out at what is on the horizon for our company. What is our customer doing? What's going on in the economy? And are we doing the things we need to do to best position our company to be successful in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and out? And I've kind of started spending time with my software customers, having that conversation, looking at their data and using some of their data and projecting what happens 2 years from now when FedEx changes the fuel surcharge mileage requirement from 6.8 to 7.0. How does that impact your company? What's your strategic response to that now, so that 2 years from now, when it does happen, then you can be prepared for that, and maybe even also prepare for the contract change in 2028, because it's going to happen again. And so that's a different way of thinking for most contractors. I know it's a different way than I used to think. And one of the ways that I think it's important is that you have to organize your company in a way and start spending more time looking out and spending a lot of time looking at what FedEx does and what do they say. And so let's have a frank conversation about that. So what is going on at FedEx? Look, they're doing this transformation, but it's about 15 years too late. They've been hearing for over a decade that they needed to get away from this this corporate establishment of having 3 separate trucking businesses, right? All independently managed, independently supported, no interaction between the 3, pretty much. Essentially 3 wholly owned subsidiaries is kind of the way that it operated, and there was a great deal of overlap. Now, clearly, FedEx felt that was giving them some brand differentiation from UPS, but it was costing them a lot of money. And they also knew that to integrate those, it was going to cost them a lot of money. And so we have contractors, we've seen the technology really advance on the FedEx Express side, not so much on the LTL business, and really not at all on the FedEx ground business, right? And so now they're faced with a situation where their investors have pretty much demanded that they're going to force them to do this transformation. So FedEx is in the process of doing that. And so what does that mean? You know, they've already said it's going to cost them a couple $2 billion. And it's going to be a whole lot more than just reducing headcount and reducing costs. They have to change how they're operating. And I've said before, and you guys have kind of heard me say it, I did some research and found that the FedEx GDP ranks 80th if FedEx was a country. So out of 213 countries in the world, FedEx comes in at number 80. And so that's big, right? I mean, it's $80 billion as a big operation, bigger than the majority of the countries on the planet. And so that's what the FedEx leadership is charged with, managing one of the top 80 economies on the planet. And that's a very challenging thing to do. I think we get frustrated with them, but it's really important to understand what our customer is going through and what challenges they face. And understanding that gives us a better idea of how they're going to respond And then if we can understand how they're going to respond, then we can better understand how we need to prepare and how we need to respond. So that's the purpose of this conversation. And when you watch what they're doing, they gave us a plan. They've changed their leadership structure. Okay, that was a serious commitment. Changed the entire leadership team pretty much at FedEx Ground. And their plan is to transform the whole company in 3 years. Well, it's going to cost more and take longer. You can count on that. And with our customer being in a tumultuous state, then our state is tumultuous to an exponent, right? And that tumultuous state with our customer creates uncertainty. And that uncertainty is something that we haven't typically felt in the TSP world. And another way of saying uncertainty is risk. So up to this point, we have all had a fairly good handle on what kind of risk we had to manage as TSPs. And that's all changed because there's so much uncertainty inside our customer right now that it's a very difficult thing to truly understand the risks that we're facing and more how to manage our way through that risk. And one of the key things to remember, and we've all said this, including me, I thought FedEx wanted to have a partnership with us. And the reality is that's not true. I don't know if it's ever been true, but it's certainly not been true since I've been at FedEx. Not the true partnership like we mean it when we say it. Look, FedEx's responsibility is the same as all of us. Our companies, us as individuals, our families, entities always act in their own best interest. And FedEx is acting in their own best interest. And you have to always see that. When you see what FedEx does, understand they're acting in their own best interest. Even at the station level, we have some folks on this call that have a lot of experience, even on the FedEx side of the network. And look, they'll tell you that FedEx acts in their own best interest. It's not that they don't care about their contractor network. They do. It's the only way they can get their business done. And I don't see that there's really any risk. And I hear it all the time, the conspiracy theorists, FedEx is going to bring FedEx Ground in-house. And they're not going to do that, right? First of all, and I have talked to big truck manufacturers. The trucks are not available for them to go do that. The employees are not available for them to go do that in the right places. I mean, there's just so many obstacles to them insourcing the FedEx Ground operation. You should not even consider that as a risk. It's just a waste of time. That conspiracy theory should be discarded. However, this network is going to change, and we know that how. They're telling us. And they're not going to use the language that I use, okay? All of us that were in that Orlando meeting down there, those guys are extremely polished. They're very intelligent. They're very aligned. And they practiced those pitches for weeks before they showed up in Orlando. You could tell because they're all speaking off the same talking points, using the same words. And that doesn't mean it wasn't a good conversation. It really was. But that, too, is an indicator, right? So that behavior is important to watch. But essentially, they're telling us they're going to completely change their business. Think about an $80 billion GDP country that maybe right now it has one form of government, and in 3 years, they're going to completely change it. Maybe their economy is currently focused on agriculture, and it's going to be 100% focused on manufacturing 3 years from now. I mean, the challenges of doing that cannot even be articulated sufficiently. We'd need a week just to talk about how that's going to impact them internally. And then consider yourself as an employee inside FedEx Ground. They already have had hiring freezes for years now. And so how is that going to impact them? They all know that there are going to be a lot of them not there anymore. And where's that going to take place? And how are they going to consolidate buildings to do the things that they say they want to do? So there's that uncertainty is true inside FedEx, and it only grows when you're talking about folks who are contracted with them. So it's important to think about what your customer is going through. What are they saying that they're going to do? And how is it impacting their people, the people that we interact with? Because that's going to change that dynamic as well. So just remember, they always act in their own best interest, and they don't care about you as an individual entity. They do not. They can't. They will do their best for you where they can, but they are not making corporate decisions based on XYZ Inc. in Birmingham, Alabama. They are not doing it. And you have to just understand now that the benevolent relationship, if it was ever really there, it's gone, and you're standing on your own 2 feet. Now, this is not a bad thing. Those of you who run businesses in other industries already experience that. No one is coming to save you, right? You cannot depend on FedEx to suddenly make your revenue top line better because you need it, or help your profitability by giving you more money or giving you more run. It's not going to happen. Those days are gone if they were ever true. But now we have to behave as if our business must stand on its own. And that's exactly how FedEx is treating us, right? And so that's a different way of thinking about this business than we thought about in the past. You know, there's a lot of folks out there that talk about this strategy, and I'm not exactly sure where they think they got their information, but I've heard it many times. Oh, the FedEx Express integration with Ground is going to be a net positive for TSPs, for line haul business at FedEx Ground. And I have no idea if that's true. I've not seen any FedEx person say that. I've not seen any press release say that. My analysis is, I don't know if it's true. It might be over the time be a net positive, but we all know, if you're paying attention, we've been carrying express packages for 2 years. They've been moving that volume over for a while, and they're increasing that, and we're all still seeing pretty low volume out there in the network, right? So will the express business be a net add for TSPs? I don't think in the short term you can count on that. I've heard guys say, I'm going to make sure I'm positioned so I can jump all over that express business. And I think you got to manage your business with what you can see right now. And what we can see right now is that's not having any impact. And again, the network volume, and we're going to talk about that, is much lower than it has been. So I pretty much think the express integration is going to be a wash in the short term. In the long term, as FedEx, hopefully this transformation works for them, they can turn things around, get things integrated, become more efficient, become more profitable, which is the key reason for the transformation and why they're getting pushed by investors to do that, to become more profitable, which will maybe enable them to find a way to grow top line revenue again. So look, FedEx is a very skilled company, right? You don't get to be a Fortune 50 company without having your act together. They know what they're doing. They're very good at what they do. They create, Fred Smith created an industry, right? And they've only gotten better since then. And we got to give them some credit for that. And so in June 2023, when they released their 2023-2024 budget, as they always do, that goes June 1st to May 31st, they set out certain projections for the street. That's what public companies are supposed to do. And not getting into the details of that, but that's kind of how it always goes. And of course, a huge part of that now is reporting the cost savings of the transformation and next steps in the transformation, et cetera. Well, December was the end of they announced the results from their first 2 quarters. And they missed their forecast by a large margin. It wasn't a narrow miss. It was a substantial miss. Now, think about who are these forecasters, right? These are people that make a lot of money for FedEx Ground. They are people who are paid a lot of money, and I'm sure they're working with a lot of consultants to truly understand what's going on in the macroeconomy of the United States. UPS and FedEx together carry over 20% of the U.S. GDP every day. FedEx and UPS are true indicators of what's going on in the economy. So regardless of what the folks in Washington might tell you, the fact that skilled forecasters at FedEx came up with a plan in June that they missed by 100 miles in December is an indicator of some unknowns, right, going on in the economy. And that's a risk to FedEx, which is also a risk for us. We feel it as decreased volume, of course. And in the case of FedEx, what they said was volume is at 2019 levels. 2019 levels. Okay, and when I hear a lot of folks in FedEx say, oh, February is always slow, it's coming back. Okay, well, coming back to what? I'm just listening to what our customer says, right? So, it's true that January 15th to March 15th, maybe sometimes into April, it's kind of like the dark ages in FedEx Ground. It's pretty slow. And things start to ramp up back in usually in early April. So we're going to see what happens this year. My forecast is we'll be lucky to get to 2023 April volume. And if you plan for that, you'll be happy if it exceeds that. But I don't think there's any indicators that that's going to be the case. I doubt that we're going to be at 2019 volume in December and 2023 volume in April. Now, I don't have all the volume numbers. They're kind of hard to get your hands on. I'm just listening to what they say and watching to how they're behaving, right? And then talking to you guys and seeing what's going on out there. Yeah, I've kind of used this analogy before. You know, I'm a country boy from the South. We talk in analogies. So I use the analogy COVID as it pertains to our business was like the snake swallowed the pig, right? All of a sudden, now the snake is full of pig and volume went up like a hockey stick, right? And so then we all had to scramble to be able to adjust for that. But as time goes on, the pig gets smaller in the snake. And if the pig represents volume that we have to manage, or just volume in general in the United States, logistics volume, it's been getting smaller and smaller. And I think in about mid 2022, the pig was all the way out of the snake. The second half of 2022 was slow. I called the 2022 peak a bump, but it was a smaller bump in 2023. So really in late half of 2022 is when we really started experiencing big problems on the unassigned rotation. Okay, and we started to really lose volume on the unassigned rotation. That impacted all of us because I certainly had trucks on the rotation. I think this is what FedEx would say. I think if they came to you and had to be truthful on what they see as far as it pertains to the contractor network, they would give us at least two things. The first thing they would say, there's at least 2,000 too many trucks in the network. The network as of the Orlando Summit was about 17,500 tractors, give or take a little bit. If you look at the tractor network in 2019, it was probably around 15,000. So I think if they were being honest, they know 2,000 tractors need to go away. And you're seeing some things happen out there that give you that feeling. They're not saying that to us, but their behavior is telling us that. You know, when I worked on a project in 2022 to try to come up with a better way to administrate the unassigned rotation, and I just went to them and said, look, this is not working. It's not working for contractors. It's not looking for you. There's some question as to whether or not it's contractually compliant. You know, you're going to set us all up to be in some confrontational situations. We need to work on this. And I presented some ideas, and they were very receptive. And some of those ideas actually showed up in their press release that they sent to us back in late January, where they changed how the unassigned rotation assignments could be managed. Because really the existing contract, and I expect this to be a change in this new coming contract, doesn't give FedEx the levers to reduce the size of the unassigned rotation. They're not prescribed levers to make those changes. And so what you saw in their changes that they put out in January is they essentially gave us the option to volunteer for those levers. Now, I've heard that there are places where those levers were implemented without volunteers. I don't have any facts to back that up, but I certainly heard that. Well, the reality is FedEx knows they need to reduce the number of trucks in the network. We've all seen the war on spares, right? Spare trucks all over the country are under threat. They're being eliminated left and right. Now, I faced this a couple years ago because FedEx was behind in my station on creating the necessary assigned runs. They were just running everything wild instead of doing the work to get runs assigned. And I couldn't get enough spare trucks to do everything they were asking me to do because I didn't have enough runs to justify the number of spares that I had. That was the first time I bumped into this spares limit. But that's not what we're seeing out there right now. As we went through COVID, they were just saying, bring us a truck and we'll put them to work. And then over the course of time, there's been a lot of wild work going out there, right? You have assigned runs, which are contracted, unassigned runs, which are contracted, and then you have wild, which are uncontracted runs, be it solo or teams. And in particular on the team side, there was a huge influx of wild team trucks. I know contractors that were running 30 or 40 trucks wild, and they would just send them out and turn them loose, and those guys would come back 4 to 6 weeks later, having been running continuously from spot to spot all over the U.S. Well, that, of course, in this environment where volume is at 2019 levels, is a threat to the unassigned rotation. Okay, and so FedEx realizes that, and so now they've done a couple things. They've declared war on spares. So running spares wild on solos or teams is almost been eliminated. And if you are a wild truck and you get to run, whenever you get where you're going, they're going to send you back where you came from for the most part. That's the story we get from all over the country. Look, this 2019 volume thing, I think, is legit. You know, a couple of weeks ago, might be 3 weeks ago now, the assigned runs in Rialto, which is the largest hub in the country, the assigned runs, only 20% of them got out. And almost none of the unassigned rotation got out. And so you hear these stories from around the country all the time. This is how I come to this conclusion that it really is probably 2019 volume, and it's probably not going to ramp back to where we've experienced over the past year or two for sure. And we all need to adjust our expectations down and plan for that. And this war on spares is another indicator, right? They're going for that, in my opinion, they're going for that 2,000 truck reduction. And look, if you voluntarily get off the unassigned rotation so you don't have to pay a driver, you might as well sell that truck. So I don't expect that unassigned rotation to come back around anytime soon to any kind of huge growth. I don't think there's going to be any growth in the FedEx TSP market, any net growth for at least a couple years. And I don't think you should say that I'm going to grow my business by, you know, I'm beginning to wonder, what is the value of points? Many of us have had this conversation in the past, but points aren't going to be of a huge amount of value in the short term. And they're probably of less value on the market to sell your business than they have been in the past. Because frankly, I had the highest point truck in Olive Branch. I got a truck in Olive Branch, it's got 6,000 points on it. It's still on the unassigned rotation because there's nothing getting posted. So you need to keep that in mind when you're thinking about these things. The other thing to keep in mind is, you know, really inside FedEx, the hub business, for TSPs, the hub business is different than the station business. Now, we're all trucks pulling doubles and pulling packages, right? But what the hubs do is not the same business that we do in the spokes that go from the hub to the stations. And oftentimes those stations can keep you busier with your particular assigned runs that you have, whereas the hub has a whole lot more challenges that they're trying to balance, right? And so that's much more likely that this network is going to change at the hub level. We've already seen a lot of changes out there. And I will say that one of the things to pay attention to is how many empty trailers you're running between stations and hubs. If you're constantly running empty, I think that's a risky situation. If you're running empty to the hub and bringing loaded back, or if you're running empty to the hub, bringing one loaded back, there are examples around the country where FedEx has put purchase on those things where they can, so that they run fewer empty miles. So they're going to strategically look for opportunities to reduce empty miles. So you can assess, you can assess that in your own business. In my business, I'm sure it affected some of you guys as well. When they canceled the 7-day-a-week business, you know, our Saturday night TSP runs went away. Man, it hit me for $900,000, right? I mean, it was a huge hit. And that not only impacted top line revenue, it certainly made some things easier. It's easier to schedule 6 days a week than 7 days a week. But, you know, that you have a fleet size that matches a 7-day-a-week schedule. All of a sudden now you might have some overhang when it comes to capital. And the other thing is it devalued my business, right? When you lose $900,000 in revenue, your business is worth less. And so some of these actions that are going to be a part of the transformation, they are a necessary part of the transformation. They are going to have net negative impacts on certain contractors. Those of us who got severely hit by that Saturday night cancellation, it's not that they hate me, but they didn't consider the devaluation of my business and their business in their decision. They're acting in their own best interest, and they made that decision, and it had a major impact on me. So this change is also impacting assigned runs, right? I had a $350,000 a week run, had been running for years, and they walked in January and canceled. Just went away like a cool summer breeze. Not coming back. We don't plan to ever run it again. And so there's another major revenue hit that's part of this transformation that we're going through as they reorganize all their line haul runs to try to optimize them from a cost perspective. And look, it's the right thing for them to do. But we have to understand that the network we have was built on COVID and some of the things that happened in a growing economy going up to COVID, and we're not in that economy anymore, right? 2018 was a strong year at FedEx. 2019 was a stronger year. And then 2020 was even stronger, and COVID made it 10 times stronger. But it's not like we had a terrible economy in 2018 and 2019 and 2020 early. We did not. We had a booming economy. So FedEx was already booming. And so we're working our way back to that, and we're going to have to step back through it again. And, you know, probably the most important message I want to get out today is this: the FedEx constant is gone, and it ain't coming back. Now, what do I mean by that? So anytime you do a calculation, if you're doing physics or calculus or whatever, oftentimes you'll have a constant, a number, you know, pi, for instance, is a constant. And when we've looked at the FedEx business, we've always considered the FedEx component of our business to be a constant. If you go to, when you're evaluating buying a business, you never ask yourself, oh, well, will FedEx keep running these runs? The FedEx was a constant. If this guy did 20,000 miles a week, I'll do 20,000 miles a week. It's just a matter, I can run that 20,000 miles a week maybe more efficiently so I can generate the funds to repay the loans, etc. That FedEx constant is gone, and it's not coming back, not in the short term. Maybe after they reconfigure everything and they get completely transformed and the new FedEx comes out of here in 2026, 2027, maybe we get back to the point where the FedEx constant, it kind of reformulates itself, and then we can have confidence in it again. But in the short term, you cannot expect that. And so your 1, 3, 5 year strategy needs to assume that the FedEx constant is not there. And it will affect the valuation of your business because the lack of that FedEx being a constant. You know, I talked to guys that have been around for 35 years in this business. I talked to a lot of them, and they said, I've never seen FedEx contractor revenue go backwards in the TSP world. Even in 2008, which is the worst financial crisis of our time, contractors didn't go backwards in revenue. They didn't grow for a couple years, but they didn't go backwards, right? I just talked about an example where I went backwards over $1 million a year. And there are plenty of you out there that have experienced the same thing. So this is a new, never before seen FedEx ground. And it's not going to, what you learned how to do in 2015 and 2018 and 2021 to run your business, it got you to here, but it will not fully inform you of how to operate your business going forward because FedEx is no longer a constant. And you have to now add that uncertainty and that risk assessment to your analysis inside your own business as well as outside in order to be successful and give yourself the best chance of getting through this transformation. Remember, whenever you do a purchase of when you go buy a car, the risk associated with that car, do you know its history, affects the value, right? And so now this FedEx constant that has essentially evaporated. Now, when you squeeze on the FedEx side, every time you squeeze it, it looks a little different, right? And so that's affecting the valuations of our business, and that's going to be the case going forward. It's also made some lenders a little scared to loan money in this space. So it's going to get a little harder to get money to buy stuff if you want to buy it. I think there's going to be opportunities to buy, and there's going to be opportunities to buy things at good prices because the valuations have been pressed down. And if you can buy them at a good price and hang on for 5 years, it'll be worth a little bit more. But you have to make sure you get into that. You know, as I say this all the time. When I was a Navy pilot, we used to say, it's the one you don't see that will kill you. And we also used to say it's just as important to get back to the ship as it is to get to the target. And so you have to include those concepts even more now when you look at acquisitions. What is it about this acquisition that I don't know? I need to figure it out. I need to analyze it at a deeper level. And then I want to get into this acquisition having an exit strategy. And so you need to plan all that in advance. Don't just lumber your way along. And we're going to talk about how to do those things as we go along, because I really think it's going to be thinner margins going forward. The cost associated with COVID never went back. Trucks are cheaper, but nothing else is. Unless you guys have reset what you're paying drivers, all those raises we had to give during COVID to keep drivers or attract drivers, you're still paying that, right? And now in some cases, your revenue to payroll number is way out of whack, and we're going to talk about that. And so, Mark, you're going to have to get better at squeezing margin out of your existing cost basis, right? And so that means you have to understand your own business better at a deeper level. You can't just say, oh, well, I do this for fuel and I do this for that, and that's going to be enough. It used to be that, right? The way I managed my businesses in 2023 was way more in depth and targeted than it was in 2018. 5 years later, I had to work harder to manage my business to make lower margins. I mean, that's just the reality. So everybody is and will continue to be impacted, and preparation is the key. So we talked about risk assessment. For instance, look at your existing runs, and we're going to spend some time on these things, but you could already start analyzing your existing runs. We talked about empty miles. See how that's going. See where you are. How many trucks are in the lane where you have assigned runs? Are you number one in that lane if there's 5 trucks? Are you number one in that lane? There's only 1 in that lane. You really want to understand this kind of detail. I knew it in the past. I kind of knew it, but I didn't know it in depth, because if you're number 1 in a lane and there's 5 trucks, that lane is probably safe for you. But if you're number 5 in that lane and there's 5 trucks, there's more risk for you than there is for the guy number 1. In my case, I was number 1 and the only truck in that lane. They just eliminated the lane. So that's also a potential risk. I'm not asking you to panic or suggesting that you should. I'm just saying, understand your business at an even deeper level. And what does that mean? How is FedEx behaving? And how could their behavior affect you? This is your job as the owner, as the CEO. And you can only do that by paying attention to what they're doing, understanding what is the state of the network as we just described it, and what are my options? What skills can I learn to bring to the table to help me better perform in this business? So, we're coming close to the end here, and I've talked to Blue Streak. Let me take a couple questions here. So, we see the needle move? One of the things I meant to say is one of the key indicators in the FedEx business is what's going on in the spot world. Those of you, I had to learn this lesson. I didn't do spots when I first got in it. Then I figured out I was sadly mistaken, and I got into the spot business in a pretty significant way. It is the most profitable part of FedEx Ground. The customers of mine, we do some in-depth analysis. We look at net revenue per mile, and what I see is those who do a lot of spots in conjunction with their line haul runs have the highest net revenue per mile. It's not even close. So being in the spot business is really good, because look, the vast majority of the volume in the FedEx network is coming through the spot world, right? So that world, we're essentially the last mile shipper for Target, Walmart, Sam's, Hibbett Sports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're essentially providing an Amazon-like service for anybody not named Amazon. Amazon is shipping their own stuff. They're a retailer primarily, and they built a trucking network to lower their costs to ship their own product. And then FedEx is the solution, as is UPS, for everybody not named Amazon. And so the spot business, I have noticed, has stabilized pretty well over the course of February, and that could be a good sign. And so in terms of your question about what volume is varying across the country, as we talked about. It's a little bit weaker in hubs than it is in stations. So that might be why the P&D world is experiencing, a little better situation. But I talked to plenty of P&D contractors where that's not the case. The spot business has been relatively stable across the country, though a little bit weaker than you might expect it to be in California. So all those things are macroeconomic indicators, right? Your little business is a macroeconomic indicator when you compare it to what's going on across the network. Let's see here. Also, so some shuttle work that it could be, and it could be in certain locations that some shuttle work could pick up. And look, when I say there's not going to be any net growth, that doesn't mean there won't be any local growth. But I believe if you set Paul Melander down and you squeeze him on the arm and said, "Is there going to be more trucks running in 2025 than there are in 2024?" He's going to say no. That doesn't mean that there won't be some localized increases. And in particular, with the FedEx capital plan, they're gonna build some new buildings that consolidate express, ground, and freight all in the same building. And of course, that means that it has to have cross dock capability to handle forklifts, moving pallets, and all this kind of stuff. And in those local environments, there could very well be some localized growth. But net growth in the network, I don't think it's going to be there. So that doesn't mean that's a bad thing. It just means you need to figure it into your risk calculus. When I got into the business, I'm like, everybody I talk to, you should be able to grow this business 20% a year. And I didn't grow at 20% a year. I grew at 40 or 50% a year. I started with 3 trucks in 2018, and by 2021, I was running almost 60. Okay, so that's not going to happen over the next few years. You can't look at somebody like me and the experience I had and say, I want to do that. We all want to do that. It's not going to happen. And that business lost 20 trucks, right? So there was some things I had to manage my way out of, right? So everybody's had those situations. Yeah, I do have trucks, or did have trucks on unassigned boards, and you got to get very creative on how you manage that. And so we asked the question here as well, broadcast to all. Do you have, how many times each truck is running every week? So, this is kind of what I wanted to give for you today. This is my view of the state of the network. I think it's a realistic view. It's not the pie in the sky view. It's not this view that tells you we're going to continue to be able to grow 20% a year. FedEx is retrenching itself. They say it's 2019 all over again, right? So it's Groundhog Day, and the reference point is 2019. And so you need to think like that. Doesn't mean that locally your business won't have some growth opportunities. I hope they do. But we know as a network, there won't be any net growth. At 17,000 tractors, we're at 2025, I guarantee you, there will not be 17,000 tractors in this network. There won't be. So plan for that accordingly. If anybody has any questions, maybe you can shoot them in here on the chat. And next week at the same time, we're going to have Alex Froome come on board, and he and I work together, and he did most of the work, frankly. We've been through the whole contract in infinite detail, and he's done a really good job of bringing out the things that you need to know. And I've talked to a lot of contractors that have never read the entire contract. And look, I get it. But I think now that we've talked about where are we in this world of FedEx Ground right now, we kind of have a state of the network understanding. Then the next thing I want to do is understand what your responsibilities are with respect to the contract. Now, look, that's some dry content, right? It's not going to be incredibly exciting, but it's stuff that you may not have looked at recently. You might not realize have changed. I learned a couple things going through it with Alex. I'm sure you're going to learn some things about the contract that you didn't know, and you'll have some opportunity to ask some questions. But he's gone through all the appendixes, all the attachments, and we're going to have a conversation about all of them. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, in week 3 of this, so 2 weeks from now, Matt's going to come on board. He's our Wall Street analyst, and he covers FedEx. He's been covering FedEx for a long time, and he's going to talk to us in detail about how the investment world sees FedEx, how the folks look at FedEx from outside. Okay. And like I said, these sessions are all going to go long. And so we created the My Ground Force Community Forum for you to jump in there, put your topics in there, put your questions in there, and we'll work through those and have a really great session ready for you in session 4. So we just got a couple minutes left here. If anybody wants to put something in the chat, I really appreciate your attention today. I realize I may have said some things that are counter to what you feel or what you've heard, and feel free to challenge me on it. I feel like I I've spent some time talking to FedEx and non-FedEx folks and paying attention to their corporate behavior. And I think it's really important that we see it for what it is, right? The FedEx constant is gone, and we need to manage our businesses accordingly. We need to stand on our own 2 feet. And look, that doesn't mean you can all of a sudden jump into the non-FedEx transportation world, right? Because it's a depression out there. One of the reasons to be a FedEx contractor is you don't make as much money during the good times, but you make more money during the bad times. And if you're a regular trucking company, a non-FedEx trucking company right now, you're suffering. And there's a lot of them have gone out of business. Some big companies have gone out of business, and with a debt structure saying they owe 100 million or 300 million dollars. I mean, it's a terrible time out there right now. So this is not as safe a place as it used to be, but it's a hell of a lot safer than it could be if you're trying to run on the outside world. So your exit strategy is not necessarily just to go jump and run trucks for Forward Air or something, because I don't think those opportunities are that strong. Amazon contractors are suffering as well. My ground force can really, that's Norb, I appreciate you saying that. Norb is a major spot contractor out west, and he's used my ground force to great success in his business. He's very skilled at that. Freight, look, I hear all kinds of things on freight. That's a great conversation. Look, freight is not in the business that we're in, but what we know is that their schedule runs a little different than ours, right? They're kind of going to their peak in what would be calendar late Q2 and through Q3. And then in August, they kind of hit their dark ages, right? And FedEx historically has been using FedEx Freight to pick up in the place instead of using purchase. They have, I don't know all the labor requirements they have there. They sometimes furlough guys, but they may have guys that they're paying and it's cheaper to not furlough them. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I think in the future, when FedEx does capital expenses, we're going to see buildings that can handle all 3 units. And remember, that freight business is very, very different. It's palletized freight. It's usually moved in and out of trailers on forklifts. Though I have seen pictures of P&D trucks with a pallet in the back of it, it just boggles my mind. So I think these are kind of crazy things that we're going to see as this transformation goes on, and they test some stuff. Let's see. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think they've been very non-committal on what it means for freight. The LTL business is pretty strong, relatively speaking, to the rest of the trucking world, because Yellow Freight dropped out, right? I mean, they were a top 10 LTL. Both FedEx and UPS are top 10 LTLs. And there's huge barrier to entry to get into the LTL world. It's why you see somebody like who is that? Expo. I can't remember the name off the top of them right now. But anyway, they have become the darling of Wall Street because they've grown their LTL business so quickly, because they picked up the slack when Yellow Freight went out of business. It's a huge barrier to entry. There's no more competitors can get in that space. And so spreading that business out has helped FedEx Freight. How it's going to impact the transformation, I think, remains to be seen. I don't think they'll keep doing what they've been doing. There's been a lot of conversation. Will FedEx Freight start doing the spots? I think what you're going to see is a hybrid solution, right? You're not going to see an answer, and the answer will vary by region and vary by location. But when we as we go through this transformation, what was all done by ground contractors will be done less by ground contractors going forward. And what was done by all corporate employees at Express will almost all go away and move to ground. And freight is going to, be in that mix, but we don't know what. In the future network is going to be a hybrid model in which there's going to be purchase, ground, freight, and a little bit of express. That's what the future is going to look like. And you should expect then that the contracts are going to get adjusted to facilitate that change, right? This is watching corporate behavior. And what could it mean for me? I'm looking out. I see them doing this. What does that mean for me? Look for contract changes in the next contract to give you an indicator of where they're taking the network. It's going to a hybrid model. It's already there to some degree, but it's going to get formalized in some way, and it'll show up in the contract. Let's see here, this question. So yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I said that the tumultuous state of the network is going to have the result that there are going to be businesses for sale. And one of the reasons I'm doing this series is to try to help people who may not have, you certainly have not had to be as articulate in certain aspects of running a business that you're going to have to be now and going forward. So in particular, what you need to get really good at is understanding business metrics. I used to work for a billionaire, and I kind of always knew this, but he used to say all the time, Tim, the main thing in business is to keep the main thing the main thing. And there were four billionaires that were part owners of the business, and look, they didn't go to the bathroom without checking the metrics, right? I mean, this is how they run their business. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And historically, in the FedEx Ground TSP world, we've been a little less sophisticated than that. And so we have to get more sophisticated in really using metrics to understand what really is going on in our business. What is my fuel profitability? Am I making money on the fuel surcharge? I am, but I have this truck that's losing money. Well, fleet management in view of future contracts, how am I going to do that? And what would be the right decision and when to do that? We have to start managing at that level of detail. What's the impact of poor tire pressure on fuel mileage? I mean, all these kinds of things that they do in the real trucking world, we haven't paid as much attention to sometimes, but we have to get better at that. So in terms of buying and selling, there are going to be businesses for sale. And if you're not really good at understanding your business and finding these ways to squeeze margin out of your existing cost basis, your business is going to be under threat. Okay. And look, you can't hire enough people to do this work. You have to do more back office work now to be successful than we have in the past in terms of getting these metrics together. Some of them are very difficult to do by Excel. And you can't spend your time crunching numbers. You need to be watching what FedEx is doing and what's going on around you and in the market so you can position your company. So you're going to have to leverage some technology to get the numbers that you need and understand them at a deeper level. And some folks are not going to adjust to that very well, and they're going to be frustrated and get out of the business. I talk to them all the time. And then there are going to be some others that are going to go out of business. I've had customers go out of business who were had a heavy exposure to the unassigned rotation, and the next thing you know, they grew from a couple trucks to 15 or 20 trucks, and then the unassigned rotation went dead, and they lost their business, right? And because unassigned rotation positions without anything else in your business are not very valuable right now, right? And it's not that they couldn't be valuable in the future. There's too many trucks in the network for the volume that we have. We got 2023 or 2021 really fleet size with 2019 volume. That's what we have. We got 2,000 too many trucks. It shows up most on the unassigned rotation. Be it, I do think unassigned teams run a little bit more than unassigned solos, but nonetheless, you need to be. You could pick up some good opportunities. You just have to make sure they're properly valued. If you got some questions on that, you can call me. I've been doing that for a lot of folks. And, there's some things that you need to really pay attention to. I mentioned to it earlier. They're selling an assigned run, and it's number 5 in a lane. Well, how many are in that lane? 5. I think that particular run would have less value for me than if it was number 1 or number 2 in that lane. And so we have to do some things that we haven't done before. The other thing to assess, for instance, in my case, I had a run that they canceled, and we talked about that, and it was assigned in 2020 or 2019. But I had other runs that were assigned in 2008, 2009. Those are kind of an indicator that those are probably going to stay around because those are fundamental to how FedEx is running their business. But a run that was assigned in the past 3 years, you might want to assess the risk on that a little bit more. It's going to force you to have some conversations with senior managers that you might not have had before and ask them some hard questions about, hey, what do the volumes look like in these lanes? And what's the risk of the planners in the sky deciding they're going to readjust some things? You need to understand it at deeper detail. What is your target mileage out of a particular station every week, and how often are you hitting it? Look at those kinds of details. But if you have some more questions, please give me a call. Anybody else? Let's see here. Any more questions? I don't see any more questions, and we're at the end of our time. I really appreciate you guys showing up today and getting on this journey with me. We've been working hard for the past several months to make sure we do a good job on this for you. Next week, as I said, Alex is going to be here. You guys all know him. He's incredibly smart. I hate to say that about a West Point guy, but yeah, he is. And he has Wall Street experience as well. And he will talk to us about the contract. So again, hey, let's see you in the My Ground Force Community Forum. Let's continue this conversation there. And we'll be in and out of that forum over the next week until next Tuesday when we'll be back here at 2 o'clock. Great to talk to you guys today. Looking forward to going on this journey with you. Thanks again.